It was supposed to be just another polished meeting in a glass-walled boardroom, where power was measured not by words but by the subtle gestures that defined respect. Yet in one instant, a single act of arrogance revealed something far deeper. A billionaire extended his hand to a line of guests, but when he reached the black woman standing at the end, he pulled back, smirking, "I don't shake hands with staff." The room froze. He thought she was nobody. What he didn't know, within minutes, she would control the fate of his empire. $2 billion hung in the balance. Would his empire survive his arrogance? Before that fateful meeting, Aya Thompson's life was the picture of quiet power, though few outside elite circles knew her name. Aya, born and raised in Atlanta, she had worked her way through relentless nights of study, graduating top of her class from Harvard Business School. While others chased recognition, Maya chased impact. She became a financial strategist, then an investor, and eventually rose to manage one of the largest private equity funds in the country. Her style was understated. No flashy designer logos, no entourage, no loud proclamations. She believed true. Power didn't need to shout. It simply entered a room and shifted the atmosphere. Behind her calm presence stood influence that stretched across industries: real estate, tech, renewable energy, and even global banking. Quietly, her firm controlled billions. When she walked into that boardroom on a crisp New York morning, she wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to evaluate a potential partnership. The company's billionaire CEO needed funding too. Save his struggling venture, and Maya's firm was prepared to invest. But there was something about her that made people underestimate her. Maybe it was her soft-spoken voice. Maybe it was the fact that she was a black woman in a world still dominated by white men with inherited wealth. Whatever it was, she had faced it countless times before. The sideways glances, dismissive tones, the assumption that she was just support staff. That morning, she took her seat quietly at the long mahogany table, reviewing her notes. She noticed the way the CEO strutted in, shaking hands with each man at the table, his smile polished like glass. When he reached her, his hand paused, his smirk curling as he pulled back with that line that sliced through the air like a blade. "I don't shake hands with staff." The room chuckled uneasily, some glancing at Maya, others at their papers, too afraid to break the silence. Maya didn't flinch. She had seen this before, different faces, same arrogance. She simply closed her folder, her eyes calm, unreadable. The billionaire didn't realize that the very staff he dismissed was about to decide whether his empire lived or crumbled. And here's the question for you. If you were in Maya's seat, dismissed so openly, what would you do? React immediately? Or stay silent and let the moment speak louder later? The meeting pressed on as though nothing had happened. The billionaire clicked through his presentation with the ease of a man used to controlling every room he entered. Charts projected on the wall showed growth curves, expansion plans, and promises of untapped markets. His voice was confident, rehearsed, designed to dazzle. But Maya's focus wasn't on the numbers. It was on the way he carried himself. The arrogance wasn't just in his words. It was in every pause, every sidelong glance, every assumption that the people before him were simply there to validate his importance. Around the table, his executives nodded eagerly, like an audience, trained to applaud on cue. They spoke about the inevitability of the company's success, about how their brand was too big to fail. But Maya's trained eye saw through the polish. The numbers didn't match the optimism. Debt levels, where high competition was fierce, and their recent acquisitions were bleeding cash. This was not a company on the rise. It was a company on the brink, desperately clinging to an image of strength. Yet none of that concerned her as much as his behavior. She had walked into countless rooms like this before, and she knew exactly what was happening to him. She wasn't a peer. She wasn't an investor with billions of dollars of capital behind her. She was invisible, someone he believed could be ignored, mocked, and dismissed without consequence. But what he didn't know was that Maya's firm was the only serious backer still considering him. Other investors had quietly stepped away, whispering doubts about his leadership and vision. Maya was his last chance at survival. As he wrapped up the presentation, he leaned back in his leather chair, smug and satisfied, as if the deal were already sealed. So he said, glancing around the table, "Shall we move forward?" His executives nodded vigorously, papers shuffling, pens scratching signatures. But Maya remained silent, her folder still closed in front of her. The billionaire's eyes flicked toward her, irritation flashing for the first time. "Do you have anything to add?" His tone was clipped, as though inviting a secretary to confirm the lunch order. Maya met his gaze, steady and unshaken. "Dot," she said. Simply dot, her calmness unsettled him. He had expected compliance, perhaps even gratitude for being allowed into the room. Instead, he was met with a quiet presence that didn't bend. The silence stretched, heavy, until one of the other investors cleared his throat and awkwardly changed the subject. But the seed was planted, the imbalance of power was shifting, and the billionaire didn't even see it. Behind the scenes, Maya was already calculating. She knew her decision wouldn't just determine whether his company survived. It would send a message to him, to the executives who laughed at his insult, and to every boardroom where arrogance and prejudice still reigned unchecked. The question was not whether she could pull the funding. The question was when and how devastating the timing would be. And as she quietly rose from her chair to step out for a call, the billionaire smirked again, convinced she was running an errand. He had no idea the call she was about to make would determine the fate of his empire. Would Maya let him carry on until the deal signing, only to crush him at the final moment? Or would she end it here, now in front of everyone? The boardroom was buzzing when Maya returned. Coffee cups clinked, papers shuffled, and the billionaire laughed too loudly at his own jokes. He leaned back in his chair, radiating the confidence of a man convinced he had already won. To him, Maya's brief absence was proof that she wasn't a decision maker. Proof that she was nothing more than background noise in a room of real power. But Maya's quiet phone call had just sealed his fate. On the other end had been her partner's fellow investors who trusted her judgment implicitly. With a single word, she redirected billions away from his company, cutting off the last lifeline keeping his empire afloat. The decision was final, irreversible, and devastating. When she sat down, she didn't open her folder. She didn't need to. She simply placed her hands on the table, her expression calm but unreadable. The billionaire turned toward her, flashing the same polished smile. "So, Maya," he said, his tone patronizing, "I hope the staff had everything ready for you. Perhaps now we can confirm your boss's decision." The executives chuckled under their breath, their eyes sliding toward her with that familiar look of dismissal. That was the moment Maya chose to strike. Her voice was soft, but it sliced through the room with precision. "The decision," she said, "has already been made. My firm has officially withdrawn its support, effective immediately." The air shifted instantly. Chuckles died. Pens froze mid-scribble. The billionaire's smile faltered, then disappeared altogether. "What?" he snapped, leaning forward. Maya met his gaze steadily. "You needed $2 billion in backing to survive the quarter. The backing no longer exists. Should prepare for a very different future." The silence that followed was deafening. His executives exchanged panicked looks, realizing their empire was crumbling right there at the table. The billionaire's face turned red, anger and disbelief colliding. You can't," he stammered. But Maya didn't flinch. She had faced worse than his tantrum, and she knew the weight of the moment. The man who thought her unworthy of a handshake now had to watch as the ground collapsed beneath his empire, all because of the very hand he refused to touch. Here's the suspenseful question. What do you think happened next? Did the billionaire swallow his pride and begged for her forgiveness? Or did he let his arrogance drag him down with his sinking empire? The fallout was immediate. Within days, headlines splashed across business journals. Empire collapses after $2 billion deal withdrawn. Investors fled, shares plummeted, and whispers spread about the CEO's reckless arrogance. The company he had built on bluster and bravado began unraveling faster than anyone thought possible. His empire, once untouchable, was suddenly fragile. exposed, and spiraling toward ruin. But for Maya, the moment was never about revenge. It wasn't about humiliating a man who had dismissed her in front of a room of peers. It was about something far greater, the principle that respect is not optional, and arrogance has consequences. She had endured years of being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. This time, she had the power to make the lesson unforgettable. Maya moved on to other ventures, her influence growing stronger with each deal. The boardrooms that once doubted her began to recognize her presence differently, not as a guest, not as staff, but as a force shaping the future of industries. She never needed to raise her voice or demand recognition. Her actions spoke louder than words ever could. The billionaire, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale whispered in elite circles. His downfall wasn't just financial, it was moral. It believed wealth granted him superiority, but in the end it was respect he lacked most. And that absence cost him everything. And maybe that's the larger truth here. Racism and arrogance aren't just cruel, they're costly. How many more empires will crumble? How many more lives will fracture before people learn the simplest truth of all? Power means nothing without respect. What about you? Do you believe arrogance like his always leads to downfall, or do too many still get away with it?